Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about causes of World War II. Make sure you guys listen to your guided notes. Will help with your World War II project for your website. This is one of the tabs that you'll need affiliation in on. You're going to be working. Obviously, this lecture will help you. You also have to be working on a worksheet as well from the book to kind of guide your way to put some things into your website that you're going to need. All right. So without further ado, we're going to move to the lecture that you guys are going to need to write down. So again, causes. Find that in your guided notes. We're going to go through a few main causes today. And all this stuff shouldn't be a surprise. We've already kind of talked about it already indirectly through the different activities that we've done already. So the first cause, obviously, is the Treaty of Versailles. This can be a major factor for why Hitler's going to rise to power. As we talked about, Germany was blamed. The war debt, the army was reduced, territory reduced. They were humiliated, economically impoverished. So think about all the different types of revolutions that we've talked about over the course of the year so far. A lot of them dealt with poor economies, poor leadership, lack of jobs, lack of food, etc. So it's no different here. That whether it's Hitler or Stalin or Mussolini or Tojo, you have people that are going through some dark times, dealing with all those issues. There's usually some kind of political instability. In Germany, you have the Weimar Republic. The people were blaming them for their conditions after World War I with signing the Treaty of Versailles. How can you allow the Allies to punish us this severely? Same for Italy, same thing. They were upset about the terms of the treaty. They didn't get what they wanted, although they were on the Ally side. Japan was angry because they weren't treated as equal at Versailles. So many countries are going to become dissatisfied with the results. And Hitler's going to use that. Mussolini's going to use those things from the treaty and is going to appeal to his people by creating a lot of fans and talking about things about, whether it's German nationalism or Italian nationalism, let's restore the glory from back in the day, using military pride. So they get the right people on their side, as we talked about. The next major cause of World War II is going to be the rise of dictatorships. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. We just did with totalitarian governments. One leader has absolute power, control the media, brainwashing techniques, propaganda. We've talked about all those things. They provide hope to the people. They unite the country. Will everybody in that country be fans of theirs? Absolutely not. But they're going to be hitting on the points that are, key to what people are feeling and thinking about. They're going to hit those topics hard and really drive home the nationalistic idea. And if you you do have opponents within your country, your job is to silence them. So as we talked about with Hitler, the Night of the Knives, where he kills over 100 of his political opponents. Stalin basically does some very similar things. He kills off his opponents, whether it's military people, whether it's those that are in government, and he limits the rights within his country. Rules with an iron fist. Third major cause of World War II, and we talked about this with the video, a couple of things that we did, was appeasement. Appeasement, so this is important. What appeasement means, it's when you give in to the demands in an attempt to avoid a larger conflict. So what does that mean in plain English? Remember that example I told you guys about, that kid crying at the grocery store, stomping, I want candy, I want this toy, sometimes parents will give in and buy that kid that toy or buy that candy because they want the problem of the temper tantrum just to stop for the time being so they don't get embarrassed. You're not teaching that kid, though, anything. All you're teaching that kid is that he's going to keep doing it again. If he throws a temper tantrum, the parents are going to give in. Well, Hitler was doing the same thing. If you look at the slides here, he was ignoring the Treaty of Versailles. He began building up his military in secret. Remember that with the underground tunnels, with things that were built in mountains to start building up the military. He began to regain lost lands. He went into Czechoslovakia, went into the Rhineland. In Britain and France, they weren't in any condition to stop him. Think about why. In the 1930s, the Great Depression happened. So people were downsizing their militaries, and they weren't really ready for military conflict. They still were reeling from economic debt from the cost of World War I. So war was not a very popular thing, and most of these countries were trying to avoid military conflict at all cost. So Hitler kind of came in at the right time, and he used that to his advantage to kind of get away with some things that he probably shouldn't have gotten away with. So all those things I talked about with by appeasement, after the horrors of War I, they wanted peace. to the Depression, cuts in military. Some British believe the treaty was too harsh. Some British thought Stalin was a greater threat than Hitler. Why? Because of communism. Hitler hated communism. So many capitalistic countries like the United States and Britain, they thought Stalin was the biggest threat because they were afraid that communism was going to spread to their countries. It create much more, I guess, bigger effects with the strikes, with the anarchies, the violence, etc. So they saw Hitler as a defender of anti-communism. Some more about appeasement. European countries and U.S. used appeasement to avoid another war, as I mentioned. So Great Britain. So this also helped you with some of your World War II with kind of identifying the Great Britain leaders too, and really understanding them. So you had two leaders in Great Britain. The first one was Neville Chamberlain. He was the Prime Minister of Great Britain, really, I guess, before World War II and the first stages of World War II. He's the one who's going to adopt the policy of appeasement because he wants to keep the UK, Great Britain, out of war. So he's the one who basically develops it in Great Britain. At that time, Winston Churchill's kind of, at the time, he's high up in government, but he's really blasting Chamberlain for this policy. Winston Churchill was a very outspoken person, and he kind of went against what a lot of people thought, which kind of got him in some trouble. He was not afraid to speak his mind, even if it was an unpopular opinion. And he was rallying people in the 30s. Hey, this appeasement is not working. We need to stand up and be strong in the face of these kind of leaders. And Chamberlain at the time played upon the appeasement role. We want to avoid war and this and that went out for a while. But by the time that World War II broke out in 1939, at that point, obviously appeasement was not working. That's when Chamberlain was he's gonna get out of power. Winston Churchill will become prime minister shortly after World War II starts, and he ends the appeasement policies. So anyway, so that's kind of some important stuff in terms of just understanding British politics under Chamberlain, and then obviously when World War II began with Churchill and how with the appeasement policies. So kind of just some little timeline, kind of how things worked. In 1931, Japan invaded Manchuria. Nothing new, as in your guys' reading. We've already talked about that. 36, Hitler sends troops to the Rhineland. Think about that video that we watched where Hitler's at the radio waiting to see if his army's going to be stopped. They weren't. That was in 1936. 37, Japan invades China. We read about that in our reading with the rape of Nanking and all the atrocities that Japan had there. They saw the Chinese as an inferior race, subhuman. 1938, Hitler moves troops into Austria and made it a part of Germany. He also threatened to invade the Sudetenland, which is Czechoslovakia. And out of that, they make a deal called the Munich Pact. The Allies agreed to give Hitler the Sudetenland, but he can't invade the whole entire Czechoslovakia. Well, that lasts about a year. By the way, you need to know the Munich Pact. So make sure you make a little star next to it. About a year later, Hitler goes back on the pact. Again, he knows that Britain and France are trying to avoid war, so he does. He invades Czechoslovakia. He takes them in, and all this stuff, as I just said, the League of Nations does nothing. Guys, the League of Nations was powerless because the U.S. wasn't involved in it. These countries, Great Britain and France, if they weren't willing to go into war, they're not going to enforce any League of Nations policies. So they do nothing. They let them violate terms of the treaty, and there you have it. All right. Thank you so much.